opening quotation. Time begins now. In 1966, the Prime Minister of Australia, Harold Holt, went swimming at the beach one day, and he walked into the ocean and simply disappeared, never to be seen again. And this is a very strange thing to be remembered for because ultimately his achievements as a Prime Minister weren't quite nearly as remarkable as what he's remembered for now, which is disappearing randomly in the ocean. And this idea of what we're remembered for actually brings us to today's quotation. From Abu Bakr, advisor to the Prophet Muhammad, "Cursed is the man who dies, but the evil done by him survives." This idea that the evil done by a man survives, we can also extrapolate this to say the good that is done by a man survives. In other words, we all leave a legacy. And we have to consider that legacy. What are we going to leave behind as we go about this life? Because we're all going to die. We're all going to be cursed like that. We should figure out how we're going to leave the world a better place. We're going to take a look at this through two key areas of analysis. First of all, how we don't need to be conventional. We can be creative in our legacy. And additionally, how we must examine the potential consequences of the legacy that we choose. Now, to start us off, let's take a look at the many different ways that we can choose what our legacy can be. Now, we can be conventional about our legacy. In other words, we can do things that most people would agree would benefit the world. A good example of this is Bill Gates. With his philanthropic Gates Foundation, he's administered many malaria vaccines to Africa. And this is certainly a wonderful thing. I don't think anyone besides some loud people on the internet would call this a bad thing. This is a really great legacy for Gates to leave behind. So as he goes about his legacy, it's clear that he is intentional about what he's going to leave behind in the world. However, we don't have to be quite so conventional about our legacy. Take, for example, Elon Musk. Now, Elon Musk is an interesting character, to say the least, but he decides that one of his legacies will be through his company, SpaceX, which is a company whose mission is to colonize Mars. Because, the Earth is getting messed up. Why don't we just go to another planet? Now, in Musk's eyes, he is benefiting humanity. And you know what? Down the road, we may benefit from colonizing Mars. Either way, Musk is taking an unconventional approach to what he wants to leave behind for the world. And there is something to be said about this, that we don't have to be quite so traditional in how we choose what we leave behind. Additionally, when we choose what we leave behind, it is important that we examine the unforeseen consequences. Because we see many examples of history where people did not do that and very bad things happened. One example is Benjamin Franklin. Now, he is very renowned for many wonderful contributions to the scientific world. One example is how he studied electricity, but he made a critical mistake. He asserted that electricity flows from the positive end of a battery to the negative end. And that is still how we model electricity today, but it's not how electricity works. It actually flows from the negative end of a battery to the positive end. This has caused numerous inconveniences for electrical engineers. Now, of course, we forgive Franklin for all his other contributions, but he did not consider the consequences of, what if my positives and negatives are wrong? Additionally, there's another historical character named Eli Whitney, who invented the cotton gin. And now, this was a very revolutionary machine that incredibly increased the efficiency of cotton production. However, this was invented during the time when slaves were working in plantations. And the increased demand in cotton led to an increased demand in slaves and an increased demand in land. And that increased demand ultimately led to the Trail of Tears. Even though Whitney invented a really great machine in theory, he didn't consider the consequences that it would have socially. So we must do the same. We ought to examine how are our actions going to impact the world in maybe unforeseen ways. After examining how we can be creative with the legacy we leave behind, and also how we must examine the unforeseen potential consequences of our legacy, we can see that today's quotation, "Cursed is the man who dies, but the evil done by him survives," it has a lot of merit. Because when we have these unforeseen consequences, then the evil done by us does live on. But at least we're not going to be like Holtz, where there's really nothing to leave behind but walking into the ocean.